my pleasure to introduce Rona Papal. And Rona was born in Kabul, Afghanistan, to a well-off family who owned a textile factory. Everything was full of hope and excitement for Afghanistan and for Rona and her new husband when they came to America so he could work at the United Nations. It was 1977. But within 2 years, war had changed everything in Afghanistan, and it continues that way today. They kept thinking, oh, it'll all be okay in a couple of months and we'll return. But instead, they had to recreate their lives here in the States, and she'll tell you. Rona worked for 15 years at Alameda County Social Services in the Refugee Department. She then became executive director of the Afghan Coalition in Fremont, which is where we would do our meetings. And for the past 20 years, I guess it's a blessing, and it's also sad that her focus is on successive waves of refugees from Afghanistan. She and her husband have raised 2 daughters and a son. One daughter is a partner at Price Waterhouse, another daughter is a scientist, and their son is attending college at Cal Poly. So, Rona, come on up. Give her a hand.
Thank you, Mr. Elliott, the Media Center and the library to give us a time so I can talk to you about who I am and why we are here. On April 1978, I was in my New York apartment. And when I turned the TV on, and suddenly I heard the news. There's a coup happened in Afghanistan. And it was the Soviet Afghan military, pro-Soviet, and they are violently killed the president and his family, even their little children. So we were very panicked. We don't know what to do. We are we wanted to call and see how is our family doing. And for 2 weeks, we couldn't get to call Afghanistan. All the lines didn't work. So after, when we heard from them, and we said, we want to come back, we want to help, or we didn't came here to stay. Said, no, we want to go back. And they said, nope, you can't go back. Your life is in danger, or you're going to be in prison if you go back. And also, we didn't know about that we are the first wave of Afghan refugees in the United States. So in thousands of years, we never dreamed something like this happened to Afghanistan. Afghanistan was poor, but very peaceful country. People took care of each other. We had poor, but not very desperate. We had rich people, some in the capital, which is my father, one of them had textile company, and my mom was working in a volunteer with a group of King's family. So when I was 18, my mom and my family arranged my marriage with my husband. And that time, my husband was working in foreign affairs. And he took a test, a national test, and he got second. And he suddenly got opportunity so he can go to work at UN representative of Afghanistan. So we suddenly got married and moved to New York City. So the night that we came to the airport, and we didn't know anything about, we never came here, and for me, language was a problem, but my husband knew English very well. So we didn't know what to do because nobody was there to greet us. So we were looking what we should do, where to go. And finally, we found a Afghan taxi driver. I said, hey, I said, you know, we are here and we don't know where to go. So he took us to his apartment for one night, and then the next day we took care of it. So Afghan government at that time was disorganized and poor, and because we just end the monarchy in 1973. So in 1978, when the Russian completely took over Afghanistan, it was that time that my husband made a big decision in his life and said, I'm not a communist and it's against my principle, I'm not gonna work anymore, and he resigned. And we left with a very unknown future, didn't know what to do. So, but in order to, we have to live, my husband was doing odds job like truck driving, delivery, and working in a convenience store. And I have to also selling my jewelry I had, selling one of the very expensive rag that I brought in order to so we can live. So New York was very expensive. We couldn't live there and we have to move to California. It was 1980. So meanwhile, my mom and my family was in Afghanistan and their life was in danger. My father died, very heartbroken, because one day he was in his factory and suddenly one of those factory workers came and called him very bad names. And for him, it was very hard. And it's still for us hard to see my father work so hard. Thousands of people were working there, and suddenly everything is nothing. And that night when he came home and he told my mom that I lost hope. And on that night, he had a heart attack. And it was a curfew time, and my mom couldn't call a doctor or couldn't take him to a hospital. So in a Muslim culture, usually on the 40th day, everybody get together to pray for the dead person. And everybody was in our house, and suddenly there was they called and they said, everybody have to go home because the soldier looking for you guys. So my uncles and my cousins, everybody ran home. So on that night, they round them up and put them in prison for 1 or 2 years. So the factory took over by the communist government. So it's that time my father died and my mom had no income. And finally, one of the president of that factory from the communists, which is hired, he knew my family. So what he did, he was giving my mom some of small pieces of this material that they were making so she can sell and live her life. So working with Afghan refugees over the past decades, I realized we are so lucky that my family is still intact. I never was at the war on those destruction bombs. I never see that, or tortured or raped. But eventually, I saw another group of Afghans, which is now they are arriving. These are the translators. We call them the children of wars. So these are the children who born and raised during war. They don't know nothing but the war. And for them it's very hard, their family lives or marriage life, because they never been at home. They always were outside and working with the US Army. So they are the unlucky one. Even though I have lived all of my life in the US, not all, majority of my life in the US, but I'm still appreciate because they gave me this opportunity for me and my children have a future to live. But it's still, and deep down in my heart, I still always feel like to be Afghan. Almost 4 decades after we left, I still feel responsible to go back and fix it. My 3 kids, even they born here, they never went to Afghanistan, but they call themselves Afghan American. There's so much to rebuild, from a building on the outside to broken human spirit in the inside. In some way, I had no choice to be the Afghan fixer in my work here. It is an identity that I will never outgrow. Let me tell you a story. When I left Afghanistan, I always dreaming my house in Afghanistan. And after 9/11, I had the opportunity to go back and see what's going on. And when I went to inside the Kabul capital, I couldn't realize that is the city that I left before. Everything was destroyed. There was no trees, no buildings. So I went to look to see where is my house. First I went and I saw my husband's house is completely destroyed. And then I came to see our house, what happened, and I saw half of our house was bombed. I think the rocket hit, and all these glasses shattered all over. And there was 5, 6 families living inside. And after that, I never dreamed my house again because my dream completely shattered. Thank you.